Oh yay! Oh yay! Oh yay!
HMS Victory, flagship of Nelson at Trafalgar, probably the most famous battleship in the world. Standing next to him is Captain Hardy, captain of the Victory. Standing beside Nelson should have been captain of the fleet, Admiral Sir George Murray, Nelson's friend, and history could have been very different. Perhaps Nelson's last words would not have been, "Kiss me Hardy," but "Kiss me Murray." Let's go back in time to the great cabin, where Nelson and Murray spent many hours working together. Here I am, sitting at Nelson's desk in the great cabin, surrounded by some of the letters and artifacts in possession of the Murray family that tell a wonderful story of a fascinating Chichester boy. George Murray was born in Chichester in 1759 and rose to the Admiral of the Fleet, Nelson's close friend and Mayor of Chichester in 1815. The Murray family were well established in Chichester. His father, Gideon Murray, was Mayor of Chichester in 1756 and again in 1769.
I'm Ian Murray, a direct descendant to Sir George Murray. There he is up there when he served as Mayor of Chichester in 1815. And there are several other members of the Murray family that have served Chichester in the past as mayors and in other roles over the years.
A very young George started his naval career at the tender age of 11 as a midshipman aboard HMS Niger in 1771. 5 years later came his first battle scars in HMS Bristol off South Carolina in the USA, where it was reported Murray, like Nelson, knew no fear. By 1783, at the age of 24, he was made captain of San Carlos, not far behind Nelson, who was made captain at the age of 20. In September 1795, he married Anne Teasdale of Chichester, but by December 1796, he was back at sea in command of the Colossus. Murray, in Colossus, distinguished himself in battles against the Spanish and French fleets at Cape St. Vincent in February 1797. Colossus was very badly damaged and never really recovered. This eventually leading to the tragedy of her shipwreck off the Isles of Scilly, en route to England with Sir William Hamilton's famous collection of Greek vases. A fierce storm had arisen on the 10th of December. By midnight, the ship was lost, but only one crew member perished. At the court-martial, no blame was placed on Murray. Captain George Murray was already known to Nelson as captain of the Colossus as part of the Mediterranean fleet, although Murray missed the famous Battle of the Nile in 1798, but took part in the celebration in September when Lady Hamilton threw an enormous birthday party for Nelson with some 1,800 guests. She wrote,
"Lady Hamilton is very sorry Captain cannot yet get here, written to General, and hopes the Captain will be able to come on shore this morning to dine with the hero of the Nile. Tomorrow he may greet Nelson's birthday. Lady H. hopes to have the happiness and honour of Captain Murray's company with his first lieutenant to dinner with as many officers, midshipmen as he can spare for the ball in the evening, but particularly those spoken of so highly as Captain Murray is by our brave Admiral.
The enduring friendship of Nelson and Murray really came in the Battle of Copenhagen, March 1801. It was possibly the most risky of all Nelson's battles and could have ended in defeat had Nelson not ignored the orders of his senior officer, Admiral Parker, to leave off action. Famously, Nelson, in his ship Elephant, raised his telescope to his blind eye and said, "I only have one eye. I have a right to be blind sometimes. I really do not see the signal." Murray, in the Edgar, distinguished himself leading the van and waiting until the last minute to ensure a first and decisive broadside on the Danish ship Jylland. The battle finished with a brilliant truce by Nelson, thus saving the day. Nelson wrote, "Murray of the Edgar set a notable example of intrepidity that was followed by every captain, officer and man of the squadron." Nelson never forgot Murray's contribution to Copenhagen, and on its second anniversary, which was also the birth of Murray's son, Nelson insisted on naming him after the battle. No doubt Mrs. Murray had something to say. The child was baptized George, St. Vincent, Thomas, Nelson Murray. Another glimpse of the friendship of Murray and Nelson came in a letter from Murray to Trowbridge when Nelson was ill. "What we should have done or shall do without him, I do not know. The more I see of him, the more I admire him." In 1803, with war on the horizon, Nelson was appointed to command the naval force and wanted Murray as captain of the fleet, essentially the role of chief of staff and responsible for ensuring the fleet was fitted out, provisioned and ready for battle. Murray was reluctant, as he feared his appointment would strain the friendship that he had with Nelson. Nelson was an exacting commander, and tensions could arise between an admiral and the captain of the fleet. Nelson reassured Murray that he would waive rank and work with him as a friend. Such was the deep intimacy between them. By April 20th, Nelson and Murray, as captain of the fleet, left Portsmouth on the recently refitted Victory, virtually as we can see her today at Portsmouth. Throughout 1804, Murray carried on with his duties, and in August, Nelson was appointed Vice Admiral of the White and Murray Rear Admiral of the Blue. After chasing the French fleet, Victory returned to Spithead, and Nelson took Murray in his own barge to share the cheers and thanks of the crowd. Murray, now back in the UK, had to get involved with family matters. In July 1805, Murray's father-in-law died, leaving him executor of a complex will. Murray therefore missed the Battle of Trafalgar. Nelson would not appoint another captain of the fleet, hence the famous saying, "Murray or none." Nelson's last letter to be written in England was to Murray, thanking him for a side of venison on the 14th of September. "I am at this moment getting on the boat at the bathing machines. May every success attend you and health, the greatest of blessings. I beg my respects to Mrs. Murray, and ever, my dear Murray, believe me to be your most faithful friend, Nelson Bronte." Fate is fickle, and it's almost certain that it would have been Murray, not Hardy, that would have been by Nelson's side when he died. Although there are no records, the loss of Nelson affected him deeply. His health suffered, and he was never happy at sea again. A recently discovered conveyance of 1804, with George Murray's signature, although he was at sea at the time, shows that his new house, later to become the present-day Ship Hotel, was being built. The new fine Georgian house became known as the Admiralty because of its spacious rooms. Although alterations have been made, it is still possible to imagine the house as Mary would have known it, particularly the grand sweeping staircase. To this day, the naval connection is still there. In November 1805, Mary was promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral of the White and placed in command of the fleet at the River Plate in the ship Polyphemus. The activities in Buenos Aires were mainly a land military campaign, and the fleet had little to do but assist. Perhaps, without his friend and mentor Nelson, much of the rewards of the job were missing. He was asked to be in command of the Channel Fleet, one of the most important roles in the Navy. He declined, and at the age of 49, after 27 years of extremely active service, he retired back to his home, Chichester. Although he was not on active service by December 1813, he was Vice Admiral of the Red, a rank higher than that of Nelson at the time of Trafalgar. The Murrays were known by John Marsh, who mentions them in his diaries. Murray and Marsh were involved in the establishment of St. John's Chapel, which was consecrated and opened for worship on the 24th of September, 1813. (1815) must have been a red-letter time for Murray, for he was made Knight of the Bath and elected Mayor of Chichester. Admiral Sir George Murray died suddenly on the 28th of February 1819. He was just 59. His wife Anne survived him for another 32 years, dying in Boulogne, aged 96. Both Admiral Sir George and his wife are buried here in Paradise in Chichester Cathedral. In the sailor's corner of the cathedral, showing HMS Edgar at the Battle of Copenhagen, is the following inscription. His virtues need not be recorded here. They are engraved on the hearts of all who knew him.
I call upon the Mayor, the Right Worshipful Mayor of Chichester, Councillor Alan Chaplin, to unveil this plaque for Sir George Murray on the Chip Hotel.
These feelings are best summed up by a letter from Sir Edward Pellow, Lord Exmouth, on the news of his death. My dear Sir James, I know not when I have received so severe a shock as from your melancholy letter today conveying to me the irreparable loss of my dear old friend Sir George Murray. He was indeed a virtuous and good man as ever lived, and his liberal heart was open to the cause of friendship as much as any man's could be, and a more true and faithful friend could nowhere be found. He was truly beloved while living, and his memory will be cherished wherever he was known. It was still more shocking by its suddenness, although that was always looked for, but we are seldom more prepared for it, notwithstanding all the warning which can be given to us. Whenever it may be proper, I will entreat you to express my deep and real regret for a man I do believe I loved as my brother. It will afford me great pleasure to show every possible respect to his memory, and should his funeral, poor dear fellow, be a public one, I shall be very glad to be found with you at his side. Halstead, at my side, begs to offer his deep regret and his regards to you with those, my dear Sir James, of your attached and faithful friend, Exmouth.